Welcome to the NBA Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden, taking a look at tonight's five-game slate. Hope everyone had a good and happy, safe New Year. We obviously come back into a full grind of NBA games this week. Tonight, a little light, but tomorrow we got the big whopping 12 games.
Yeah, first off, just want to wish everyone a happy New Year's. As you said, hopefully everyone had a safe and enjoyable New Year's. But we are back with NBA, and we kind of have to limit ourselves tonight. We want to monitor our minutes and make sure that we don't overwork ourselves tonight because we got a back-to-back with 12 games tomorrow.
We do have back-to-back. I might be on a minutes limit. I know Coach was talking to you about being on a minutes limit, so we might be topping out at like 24, 25 here tonight.
Yeah, well, I originally warmed up. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to record today, but I warmed up and I'm good to go, but they're going to monitor my minutes.
And for all those people playing in the podcast leagues, I'm sorry there's no late swap this season. So if you didn't play Brent, you're out of luck.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Let's dive in here. Portland and Cleveland injury news right off the bat. We got some injury news a little while ago. Lillard expected to play tonight. Kevin Love now questionable. Kind of changes things a little bit on this slate.
And you buried the lead there. Isaiah Thomas is back.
I guess. And I'm not a Celtics fan, of course. So, it's not has nothing to do with that.
I mean, you can't be mad at Thomas. It's not like he did anything wrong in the situation.
No. And I kind of am like cringing at waiting the fact if anyone does boo him, it just makes our fan base look even more ridiculous as it already does.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's gonna boo him. I have a hard time seeing that happen.
Yeah, I do too. But then again, people did burn his jerseys.
Yeah.
So, all right, no more sour notes here. Yes, Thomas is back tonight. There's no official minutes limit listed for him, but you mentioned to me earlier before the show that probably about 15 minutes is about what we'll see out of him tonight.
Yeah, I'd expect maybe 4-minute stints in each quarter or something like that. I wouldn't expect too much, but he's going to be coming off the bench, which I guess if we just want to dive right in on the Cleveland side of things, that pretty much takes the bench guys out of consideration here, given that you would expect him to take a bunch of usage away from Dwayne Wade and Jeff Green and those guys. Obviously, Kevin Love being out could change things a little bit. You would see maybe Channing Frye moving in the starting lineup and be an interesting option here, but yeah, you're basically looking at LeBron at this point if Kevin Love sits, and I don't know that I want to pay that price for LeBron tonight on a night where there's a bunch of really, really great mid-priced options.
Yeah, kind of looking through here, I like Dwight Howard, Blake Griffin, Booker, got that kind of tier, that next tier down from LeBron. And, also, I mean, there's probably enough value that opens up on this slate with some of the Kings guys and the Atlanta Phoenix side where you can make the case for building around LeBron tonight and cash games. I think that's a safe route to go. But GPPs, I mean, I'm kind of going to be looking at some different lineup construction.
Yeah, I mean, I've always preferred balanced lineups anyways in GPPs, but as you mentioned in cash games, obviously, if you want to use LeBron, that's fine. He obviously has, a fairly safe floor if you ignore the fact that he put up a dud against Golden State on Christmas Day. The rest of his game's fairly solid, 50, 60 fantasy points. So obviously can't fault you if you want to go that route in cash games. Prior to the Kevin Love news coming out, I kind of did have a little bit of interest in him just because you would expect him to be able to stretch the floor against a guy like Yusuf Nurkic. But now that he's battling, a sickness, I don't know that I want to go there.
Yeah, his minutes have already been kind of, limited a bit this season. That continues to kind of be the case tonight. And I don't know. I think there's better center options. At least there's a couple others I can kind of just pivot to.
Yeah, definitely.
So with Thomas being back, the Wade, J.R. Smith, Jeff Green, Corver shots are kind of out of play.
Yeah, I mean, Dwayne Wade's really cheap. He would be very interesting in the spot given, if Thomas wasn't back tonight. But like I said, Thomas, high usage player, is going to pretty much eat up all the second unit point guard usage, which is what Dwayne Wade was kind of doing at the time. So you really can't go there anymore with that. You would expect them to share the floor for the majority of the time that Thomas is out there.
Portland side of things here tonight with Lillard back, it kind of depreciates, McCollum a little bit, who, really only had the one good game with Lillard out, that kind of what we were expecting. It was Shabazz Napier who really picked up the slack.
Yeah, obviously Napier out of play now. He was kind of priced out of consideration, even given if Lillard would have been out. I do have a lot of interest in Lillard here. We do know that the Cavaliers really struggle against point guards. If news comes out that he's going to be like a full go and they're not going to be monitoring his minutes or anything like that, at 8,900 on FanDuel, 8,500 on DraftKings, this would be a great spot to target him because obviously Portland coming off a overtime back to back. This is their third game in 4 nights, all of them road games. So they might be a little tired, but Lillard hasn't played in a while, so he'd be fully rested. And he's the guy that I do have a lot of interest in, assuming we get word that he's going to be a full go.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I'm kind of hoping people take a wait and see approach with Lillard after a couple of injured games. So yeah, I'm with you there. As far as other Portland guys go, I don't have a lot of interest. Alfred Camino is fairly cheap. He's only 4,500 on DraftKings. Averaging 23 fantasy points over the last 5 games. I don't mind going there if you need a cheap guy, but other guys I'm not really fond of tonight.
Yeah, Mina's a guy that I do have my eye on a little bit. His minutes should be up there tonight, given that he's their best defender and will be probably guarding LeBron for a majority of the game. So he's a guy that you can kind of lock into cash games as a safe minutes play. If Kevin Love sits, I do have a little bit of interest in Yusuf Nurkic, but if Kevin Love plays, I don't really want to try to ride the Nurkic train just because, as I mentioned earlier, Kevin Love a stretch 5, is going to pull Nurkic away from the basket, and that kind of limits his upside. So if Love sits and you see like Tristan Thompson get the start, I would have some interest in Nurkic. But outside of that, maybe CJ McCollum in GPPs just because at 7,300 on DraftKings, that's still fairly cheap. He's 7,100 on FanDuel. I don't mind that price either. He is a guy that does have a lot of upside.
Yep. Knicks and Spurs here. Spurs coming into tonight's slate, relatively clean injury report, and we kind of hope it stays that way.
Yeah, it's the Spurs and it's Greg Popovich, so we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, Kawhi is, I guess, the big question mark tonight. I would expect him to sit. People got burned by him sitting last game, even though like they came out an hour ahead of time and said that there was a chance that he would sit. People still used him in cash games and then got pissed off whenever he rested. So like, just watch the news, and if you get news that Kawhi Leonard may sit tonight, don't play him in cash. That's pretty simple.
Yeah, easy enough there. If for some reason he does this, I do have a little bit of interest in the front court here, even though the Knicks are obviously a very solid front court defense. But Pau Gasol, Aldridge, I still have my eye on, and I kind of like Tony Parker here tonight. He's really cheap. The minutes have been fairly consistent here. 4,100 on DK, 4,200 on FanDuel. Like if you need a guy who can potentially get you 25 fantasy points, I mean, this is a good spot for Parker.
Yeah, it really is. I do have some interest in him just because he's pretty darn cheap. DraftKings at 4,100. I know he's pretty cheap on FanDuel as well. Let's see, he's 41 there. Knicks, a team, they do struggle to defend the ball handler in the pick and roll at times, and that's kind of what Tony Parker is really good at. The Spurs just run the pick and roll with him over and over and over and over again. So he's very interesting, even if Kawhi plays. If Kawhi sits, I do have a little interest in Kyle Anderson. Just because he's a guy that's really cheap. We'll see extra minutes without Kawhi and without Rudy Gay. LaMarcus Aldridge, still fairly cheap. I don't mind him in cash games or in GPPs if you want to get some exposure to this game. Pau Gasol, I don't know that I want to go there tonight just because there's a bunch of really, really good center options.
Yeah, there are. And you mentioned Aldridge. I mean, I think with Griffin back, people are going to be looking to go his way, just kind of in that similar price range, more so on FanDuel. Because power forward, I mean, really outside of those couple of guys, like it's not a strong position. I mean, there are some deep values that have potential tonight, but there's not a ton of locks.
Yeah, I mean, with it being a short slate already, there's generally not a bunch of options anyways. And then power forward, like you take Kevin Love out of the mix if he sits, and then you're looking at 3 or 4 guys in bad matchups, and then some other guys that are a little overpriced. So he's a guy that I think you can play and feel pretty comfortable in using even in a bad matchup.
Anyone else for the Spurs there?
No, not really. I don't really want to try to predict the Danny Green smash game that he always seems to have in random spots. So it's Parker for a cheap point guard option, Anderson if Kawhi sits. Kawhi, if he plays, is interesting. I do want to, at least warn people that you're not going to be the first person on the Kawhi Leonard train. That train has left the station. Like, you're not being smarter than the rest of the field by using him tonight.
On the Knicks, obviously, it's kind of weird, obviously with this game being so close to when they just recently played. I think a lot of people are going to be kind of going back and looking at that game. They see Beasley, go off and go ham. They saw obviously Gasol go off and go ham. It's not necessarily that we're kind of just fading those games because they had huge outings.
Yeah, if you want to use Beasley and GPPs, go for it. But like, he's a guy, he might get the minutes, he might not. Like, if you just look at his game log, I mean, 20 minutes, 33, 15, 23, 13, 25. And he has 31, 38. I think those are the games that Kristaps missed. And then 20 and 22. Like, his minutes are volatile. We obviously know he's a guy that produces when he's given the minutes, because he just goes out and dominates the usage and chucks every shot he can. So, like, if you want to use him in GPPs, go for it. I don't think he's anyone that you can trust in cash games.
Definitely not. For me, I don't really see a cash game guy on the Knicks side tonight. Like, they're fine GPP options. I mean, I'm not really a big fan of Cantor here. The minutes have been trending back down. Lee here, I'm not really a fan of at his price. Like, I don't really like the Knicks outside of really Ntilikina at a cheap price.
Yeah, Ntilikina is the guy that I'm kind of looking at here. Obviously, we know that the Knicks are trying to integrate him more into the offense. They're still not going to start him. Hornacek actually came out and said that he doesn't really want to start him now, but he does like using him to close games, and like, the minutes have been trending upwards for him. He's not a guy that's a real big offensive threat, but he does have the ability to rack up the assists and the rebounds and the steals. So I think he can feel pretty comfortable, even in this matchup, that he can get you, a decent amount of fantasy points here. And at his price, I don't mind using him if you're looking for a cheap guard and you're not wanting to go the Tony Parker route.
Yeah, and like I said, over the last 10 games, 25th in defensive efficiency against opposing point guards. They've been giving up a lot of fantasy points to point guards of late as well.
Yeah, and a lot of that just corresponds with Tony Parker being back, and it's a trend that we were able to pick on last year too. Like, the Spurs defense is really good, but against, point guards, like, just Tony Parker is really old, and it's really hard for him to defend some of these guys. So I think you can attack the Spurs here. I guess if you want to take a shot and you want to, maybe see if Jarrett Jack can get you there, I don't mind it either, but I think Ntilikina is the guy to own.
Yeah, I'm with you. Porzingis, I prefer Griffin. I prefer Aldridge over him if I'm looking at a power forward tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I'll always say, in a matchup like this, KP is always viable in GPPs, but there's just better places to go, I think, in cash games.
Yep. Anyone else from the Knicks you want to talk about?
No.
Atlanta and Phoenix here, 218 total, the highest total of the night. Obviously, a good spot here with two bad defenses. We'll start with this Atlanta side. I like Schroeder here tonight. Really reasonable price, especially on DraftKings at 7,300. Good matchup for him. Usage rate obviously through the roof still. He's a guy that I'm kind of looking to build lineups around, as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah, he's pretty much a guy that I'm just plugging in my lineups, both cash games and GPPs. And I wrote him up in the GPP article knowing that he's going to have really high ownership. I just don't care. Like, it's a matchup against a Phoenix team that really struggles to defend point guards. Their defense is terrible. He just has a ton of upside here. And sometimes that's what you're looking for in GPPs. All the time, that's what you're looking for in GPPs. But sometimes you just have to ignore the ownership. Like, these guys are chalk options for a reason. I just don't see a reason to fade him in any format here. The usage is there. The minutes are trending upwards for him. Production's been there for him. I mean, he had over 50 against Dallas. He's been over 30 in the majority of his games recently. I don't really see a reason to fade him here.
I don't either. And, some of these other Atlanta guys I like quite a bit. John Collins is playing well. The minutes are still not where you really love him to be, but still in that mid-20s. I mean, he hasn't been below 20 fantasy points since way back in the 18th. He's been great since he's returned from injury. So a good spot for him against Phoenix. Like, I'll go back to the well.
Yeah, I like him significantly more on DraftKings, where he's 4,900. FanDuel is at 5,900. That's a little bit tougher price to swallow. I do wonder what the ownership is going to look like for Collins with Muscala probably being back for this game. It might scare some people off, but I would actually expect those minutes to come from like Plumlee and Urson as opposed to John Collins here. I think this is a great spot and a great matchup against a Phoenix team that does struggle to rebound. They do struggle to keep guys off the rip from scoring at the basket. So I think you can use him here. Just know that he's only going to get you like 25 minutes, maybe 26. But that's enough. That's enough time for him to put up like 30 fantasy points. So I'll take that all day long.
Yeah, definitely is. Any interest in Bazemore, Tarian Prince here tonight?
I do have a lot of interest in Prince. He's a guy that's been playing pretty well recently. Price 5,500 on DraftKings. He's a little bit more expensive on FanDuel. He's at 6K. Small forward on FanDuel is pretty straightforward tonight. You have like 3, maybe 4 options. Prince is one of those options. So I do like him pretty much in all formats, especially in a game that should be played pretty fast. There should be a decent amount of turnovers. So I think he has pretty solid floor and a lot of upside here. Bazemore's fine. I think there's better options to go with, though.
Yeah, we kind of seen his minutes start to trend down a little bit, and that might have to kind of see with some of the other guys that picked up their play, especially of Prince too. Like it seems when Bazemore has a good week, Prince has a down week, as we've kind of stated before on the pod.
Yeah, and it's been a pretty good month for Taurean Prince. He's scored in double figures, 11 of the 15 games this month in December, actually averaging double figures and points. So it's been a good month he's coming off a good month. I expect him to continue tonight. I guess Marco Bellinelli is a guy that we could talk about here at 3,800 on DraftKings. It's pretty darn cheap for a guy. I think he's been over 20 fantasy points and let's see, 3 straight games. He's not going to play a ton of minutes, but when he's out there on the floor, he does jack up shots, and Phoenix allowing opponents to connect on a decent number of shots. They're allowing opponents to shoot 46% from the floor, 36% from 3. I do think he's a decent cash game and GPP value option here.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind him, especially given the fact that there are some cheaper Kings guys that kind of muddle the field in terms of value guards. So I'm kind of hoping Bellinelli goes a little bit overlooked.
I hope so. I don't know. I think he will on FanDuel. I think FanDuel, it's pretty clearly you just like use Devin Booker and someone and like a Lou Williams or something. But on DraftKings, I think Bellinelli kind of fits the cheap shooting guard option that you might need to make the rest of your lineup work.
Certainly. With the rest of the front court there, Collins is kind of really the only one to look at.
Yeah, with Muscala coming back, it just muddies things up, and Collins is really the only guy that you should be looking at here.
On the Phoenix side, Devin Booker, this is a guy, once again, who's been playing really well since coming back from injury. Great spot here against Atlanta. Minutes are back. They were always back from when he came back from injuries. Played over 30 in the last 3 games. Been over 40 fantasy points in 2 of the last 3. I understand the DK price tag being high to the point where maybe you don't want to go there, but DraftKings or FanDuel, it's hard to kind of pass him up at 8K.
Yeah, I don't care about the price. I don't care about his ownership. I don't. If he could come out and be like, I'm sick, I had the flu, I still don't care. Like, I'm playing him in my lineups today. The dude he's been so good since returning. I know he had a down game against the Kings, 37 fantasy points in 32 minutes, been over 40 fantasy points in the other 2. One of those was against Memphis. It's a great spot for him. And I think the part that I don't think anyone's really going to talk about today is the fact that he is actually playing point guard more frequently. They've closed the last 2 games with him at point guard, and Jay Triano actually came out and said that he wants to use Booker at the point guard position more often throughout the game. They're going to use him alongside like Troy Daniels and TJ Warren, and that really opens the floor up for him. And he talked about how he really likes his ability to be aggressive and kind of see the floor whenever he's playing that point guard role. So he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. We know his usage rate is there. There's no reason to even consider fading him in this spot.
Yeah. The other guy for the Suns, TJ Warren, I think he's obviously more in play over on FanDuel because he's a little bit higher price. He's 7,500, but you mentioned just the lack of options at small forward on FanDuel. I think Warren, you can go Warren and Prince if you're going with that balanced lineup because there's not a lot of other options.
I think you can use him on obviously FanDuel, yes, just because small forward is terrible. He's a great play on DraftKings too. the rebounding upside is there for him in this matchup. He's one of the best rebounding wings in the NBA. And against a terrible rebounding team, you'd expect those opportunities to be there for him. And, if he gets you those 10 rebounds and gets you that double-double bonus, that's huge for you on DraftKings. It's been over 20 real points in 3 of his last 4, 4 of his last 5, 5 of his last 6. So the Suns are significantly better when he scores over 20 fantasy points, or 20 real points. It's Booker and it's Warren on this offense. Those two guys are taking a ton of shots. So I think if you want to attack this game, which is going to be a popular way to go, you're looking at those two, and I guess Tyson Chandler, who it feels really bad to say, like, he's probably one of the best options on the board at center tonight just because of his price and the minutes he's been playing recently.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have no issue using Chandler. Like, it's scary to say if you're kind of pushing more chips into the pile, but I mean, it's a guy that minutes should be there tonight. It's a really good spot. I think the only other guy that I have a little bit of interest in this front court would be Marquise Chris, just because he's been back in the rotation. He's just a GPP guy still for me, but I mean, playing really well for a cheap price.
Yeah, production's been there recently for him, over 20 fantasy points and 4 straight games. The minutes have been trending upwards except for that Philly game, but he fouled out, 6 fouls in 20 minutes. But he's been producing double-digit points in 3 of his last 4, 13 rebounds against Memphis. It's a good spot for him. He's another guy that they're really happy with using in the Devin Booker point guard lineups that I talked about. And that their offense, when they're using Devin Booker at point guard, I got to find it here, but they have a 126 offensive rating when Devin Booker is playing point guard. Like, everybody is scoring in that offense with him as the point guard. So Chris is another fine option, especially on DraftKings. He's 4,600. I do like that price there. It's a little more expensive on FanDuel. He's 53. That's kind of reaching territory where I'm afraid to play him because he could foul out in like 20 minutes. But again, it's a slate where you kind of just need guys with a bunch of upside here, and he does have that.
Yeah, and like that power forward spot on FanDuel is really tricky because below 5,500, it's, Aminu is obviously a safer option, but you kind of get into this GPP territory of Beasley, Chris, Frank Kaminsky, who we'll talk about. Zach Randolph's price obviously has dropped quite a bit. He's only 5,100 now.
Yeah, on FanDuel he is. He's still ridiculous on DraftKings. He's still 6,100 on DraftKings, but that price on FanDuel is interesting.
Yeah, it's just that power forward spot is just I think that's kind of where you can make some differences on tonight's slate on FanDuel.
Yeah, both forward spots on FanDuel not that great with only a few limited options, but Chris is interesting.
As far as the other Suns guys, with Booker back, Ulis, Cannon guys, I don't have any interest in here tonight.
Neither one of those guys, I wouldn't really go there. The only guy that I would maybe look at just because he is a guy that's going to play alongside Booker in those point guard lineups is Troy Daniels. He's been over 20 minutes in 5 straight games. He doesn't really give you much other than shooting, but against a Hawks team that struggles to defend the 3-point line, this is a spot where you could see him put up, 24, 25 fantasy points and at 3,700 on DraftKings. That's a great return on your salary.
Certainly. Charlotte, Sacramento next year. Charlotte side in a good spot here against Sacramento. Some of these prices on the Charlotte guys still too cheap for me. Like, especially obviously Howard and Kemba on DraftKings, both 74, 7,500. Like, in good spots. I mean, those are definitely guys I feel like you can build around tonight.
Yeah, for sure. Even though this is a road game for Kemba.
Every time.
Yeah, he's still just too cheap. I do definitely like the spot. Interesting to note, like, since I like to joke about that, like, his home road splits this season, he's actually averaging 0.2 fantasy points per game more on the road than he is at home. So he's better on the road this season.
So when he gets back home, I gotta fade him.
Exactly. But yeah, I do think he's way too cheap for in a matchup. Like, I guess this is obviously you'd expect this to be a slower paced game. Sacramento does kind of try to slow things down, but like, because of that, people are probably going to overlook guys like Kimba and Dwight here. And Dwight at 7,400 against one of the worst center defenses in the NBA. Like, give me that all freaking day long.
Yeah, and you mentioned the slowing down. Like when people look, and if you're strictly kind of looking at fantasy points allowed to other positions that are not center, like Sacramento looks like a kind of mediocre matchup. But when you get the higher usage guys in this spot, it's a little bit of a different case. It kind of does obviously limit some of the other secondary players on this team. But when you take a look at guys that kind of the offense revolts around really Howard and Walker right now, and Batum's kind of just splashed in, it makes it fairly simple.
Yeah, you're basically just looking at those guys. And you mentioned Batum. Like, I don't really want anything to do with him at this price. Like, DraftKings jacked him up to like 6,200. He's 6,400 on FanDuel. Like, generally you do kind of like taking shooting guards against the Kings, but like he's priced way too high, and there's so many good options at shooting guard here tonight. Like, I don't really want to go there.
Yep, I agree. He's too expensive. Frank Kaminsky is probably going to be someone you'll see a lot of people talk about today because he's turned up a couple of high ceiling games. He is cheap. It is another good spot for him. I have no issue using him in tournaments, but I'm also kind of going to be looking to go some other directions too.
Yeah, I think Frank you can use in all formats. He's cheap enough. The minutes are going to be there for him. Like, and it's a good matchup for Kaminsky going up against the Kings like bench that is really, really bad. And you kind of wonder if he's going to supplant Marvin Williams as far as minutes go, just because Williams has been terrible recently. Like, if you just open up his game log, he didn't score. He went 0 of 6 against the Clippers, 0 of 2 against Golden State. He has not scored a real point in 2 straight games. He scored 4 against Milwaukee, 13 against Boston. Like, he's not really providing much of anything for this team. And I think Frank just starts to play just a bunch more minutes than him because he can actually do things like offensively. So I like him in all formats. I think he's a fine play given his price. He's basically kind of right around the same price as Marquise Chris. I think I prefer Chris in GPPs because I think he has a higher ceiling. I think Frank is the safer play in cash games.
Dwight, once again, we kind of skipped over him a little bit here, but one of my favorite centers on the slate. I'm going to be looking at him quite a bit in this spot. It's just against Sacramento, it's really hard not to use centers.
Yeah, he's a guy. I wrote him up in the GPP article. I still don't care if his ownership is high. Like, you're looking for a guy with really, really high upside here. And I mean, we've seen the upside out of Howard recently when he had 59 fantasy points against the Warriors. Like, this is a spot where you could see him put up a 20-20 game, and you kind of just don't want to fade that no matter what his ownership's going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, FanDuel, I guess, we say this quite a bit, the 8,900 price tag could be a little bit steep. I'm going to be trying to still kind of get him in. DK, he just kind of seems like a lock.
Yeah, it's just like, even on FanDuel, like at that price tag, like there's really not anyone else to look at. Like, you're looking at Dwight, Marc Gasol, and then like a cheap Tyson Chandler. There's really nowhere else to go. So I really don't hate the idea of locking him in on FanDuel either.
Yeah. I mean, outside of maybe Nurkic and a GPP, but as you said, there's really 4 options.
Yeah, or maybe Willie Cauley-Stein, but like it's still Dwight's the guy that has probably the safest floor, ignoring the fact that he put up a dud last game. He has probably the safest floor out of anyone, and outside of Gasol, maybe the highest ceiling of any big man on the slate.
Yeah, no, I agree. As kind of usual, Charlotte's secondary guys not really in play for me here.
Just Kaminsky.
Yeah. Sacramento, we're obviously dealing with some injuries. Frank Mason's been ruled out. De'Aaron Fox is questionable for tonight. So obviously, when they keep their 8-9 guards and we get a couple of them that are ruled out, it does create a little bit of safety with minutes for some of these guys.
Yeah, I really do hope that Fox is out. It's kind of weird. He wasn't expected to be back, and then like they're kind of ruling him questionable now. I do hope he sits because I do have some interest in the guards, assuming he is out. Like, I think this is a great spot for Buddy. Like, I keep on preaching that Buddy is going to have one of these games, and it's going to happen, and it could be tonight against the Hornets, who not a great defense against shooting guards. With Fox and Mason off the floor, Buddy Hield has a 27% usage rate. He's going to just put up a ton of shots, and when he gets hot and starts hitting on those shots, like, you're going to wish that you had him. I like him a lot. I like Bogdanovich as well. I think those are the two guys that I'm most interested in. Garrett Temple, cheap enough to consider at 3,800 minutes, should be secure, fairly secure with Fox and Mason out. Not a whole lot of upside though. So like I think you're still, like I said, you're looking at Hield and you're looking at Bogdanovich and GPPs, and Temple a decent cash game option.
Yeah, I mean Temple's been above 20 fantasy points in 4 of the last 5. Minutes have been pretty stable for him. I don't mind him. He's shooting guard eligible over on DraftKings. He's shooting guard eligible on DK as well. But FanDuel, I mean, 4,500, you can make the case for them just because he kind of provides a little bit of a safer floor in comparison to some of those other guys. But as you said, I mean, the ceiling kind of lies with Hield. I even think Bellinelli has a higher ceiling.
Yeah.
So, front court here for Sacramento. It's Willie Cauley-Stein, Zach Randolph. We were talking about the price. It dropped down on FanDuel. His mids have trended back down a little bit. I don't mind taking a shot on FanDuel. DraftKings, I'm not paying 61.
Yeah, he's definitely in play on FanDuel. DraftKings is kind of out of consideration. Like at the same price, I would rather take a shot on Willie Cauley-Stein on DraftKings. I'm not very high on either one. I do think if Cauley-Stein comes off the bench in this game, I think he's a much better play. That being said, we're not going to know what lineup Dave Yeager is going to roll out. It's a 9 o'clock or it's a 10 o'clock Eastern game, so we're not going to really get that news. Still worth the shot in GPPs. I mean, he's just been so good recently. He's over 30 fantasy points and 4 straight games, 5 straight games. Minutes trending upwards. You mentioned Zach Randolph's minutes kind of going back down. I would expect him to stay right around the mid-20s. He's old and they don't really need him that much. So I think Cauley-Stein's a fine GPP option, not someone that you can really trust in cash.
Yep, I agree. Anyone else want to talk about here?
No.
Memphis and LA next. Memphis obviously been kind of revolving around just a couple of players here. Tyreek Evans, obviously his price is kind of reaching new stratospheres. I kind of like going a little bit cheaper here with the Booker, Williams, or even taking a shot on McCollum, but I can't rule out Evans at his usage in minutes.
Yeah, production's just been so good for him. Like it's really tough to overlook. And if you're building a balanced lineup, you don't have to fade him. Like you can use him and you can use Booker and you can use Schroeder and these guys all in the same lineup. I mean, I don't really see a way that you're fading the usage and the production that he has. I know his price is up over 8K, but the dude's been over 40 fantasy points in like 7 of his last 10 games, and we've seen the upside. I mean, 45 fantasy points in 26 minutes against the Kings. Like even if he only plays 26, 28 minutes, if he can get you 40 fantasy points, I'll take that all day long. He's a guy that I think you can use as a core option.
Yep, certainly. Marcus All's the other center option I'm looking at tonight. Decent spot here against the Clippers. Once again, I mean, he's a guy who can do a little bit of everything. He's second to Dwight in terms for me in terms of top center options.
Yeah, I think he's a fine cash game option because like the minutes and usage are going to be there for him. I think Dwight is probably the better play, but if you want to go with the 2 center lineup and use 2 of these mid-price centers, you can use Gasol and Howard if you want to.
Yeah. As far as the other Grizzlies guys, it's hard for me to get really excited about some of these guys. I mean, some of them are playing decent minutes. We've seen Andrew Harrison. Kobe Simmons is playing a little bit more minutes. JaMychal Green's the other guy. Like, there's some cheap options if you want to take a look at. Green's probably the only one that I maybe consider here.
There's one guy, and I think he can be considered. He's not going to play a bunch of minutes, but Jarrell Martin, averaging 12.5 points per game on 22 of 35 shooting over the past 4 games. Minutes have been solid: 27, 32, 24, 24. He's getting in there and playing a decent amount of minutes, and his production's been solid. So 4,300 on DraftKings. I'm looking on FanDuel
42.
right now. Yeah, that's not a terrible price, especially at a bad power forward position on FanDuel. I kind of like him in GPPs. I think he's a viable option. Should be noted, I think this game is going to go overlooked because people look at it and they're like, Clippers and Memphis, these 2 teams playing really, really slow. Memphis has been playing much faster as of late. They have a 98.24 pace over the last 5 games. They've been over 100 points in 4 of their last 5 games. I think this game has sneaky potential to be high scoring, and if you're looking to be different, I think getting exposure to the Tyreek Evans, Mark Gasols, maybe Jerome Martins and Greens is a good way to go.
Yeah, I don't mind it. And I think, obviously with some of the other options on the other side, like it's a good game stack.
It really is. I hope if we want to move to the other side with the Clippers, like I hope Austin Rivers sits out, and I hope we get that news early on, because you can see Lou Williams come in and just smash again like he did last game. I absolutely love Lou Williams if Austin Rivers sits this game out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, he's been the guy, for quite some time now with the Clippers and dealing with their injury situations. I don't have a ton of interest in DeAndre Jordan on this slate. I just like the other guys better. I will take some shots with Blake Griffin, though. It's not the worst spot in the world for him.
Oh, I'm building around Blake Griffin. Like I don't his price on DraftKings or on FanDuel a little high, but he's still worth it. Like 9K on FanDuel, he is 8,400 on DraftKings. Production has been outstanding. Minutes have been there for him since returning, 32, 33 minutes, 24 and 25 points in the last two games. Rebounds, assists. With Austin Rivers out, the usage rate is there for him. It's just a great spot, and he's been really good against Memphis in his career. So I do like him a lot in this matchup.
Anyone else you want to talk about? I mean, Teodosic has been a little bit frustrating. The minutes have been there, but the ceiling's just been kind of capped.
Yeah, he's a guy like he hasn't been shooting the ball very well. He's been like right around the 33, 37% mark over the last couple games. Assist numbers are there for him. You'd like to see the rebounding numbers get up there a little bit. If you want to go there, that's fine. 5,700 is a little too expensive for him, though.
Yeah. And as far as the small forward position, it's been one of the ugliest small forward positions I've ever seen.
Yeah, like you're looking at like Wes Johnson playing some minutes, Wilson, all these guys. Like I'm not going near any of these Clippers like cheap guys. You're looking at Lou Williams. I guess Austin Rivers, if he plays, he can go there as well. And Blake Griffin are the kind of the core guys that I'm building around.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. That's it for us. Let's go highest score tonight. That's not LeBron.
Devin Booker.
Booker, you SOB.
I'm eating the chalk. Chalk.
Well, you know what? Serve me up some chalk as well, because I'll go Dwight Howard. I feel like that's an easier call too.
There you go.
So it's going to wrap it up for us. You can check out davidfantasycafe.com. Brent's GPP article up on the site. Cheat sheets always up by 4 o'clock or 3 hours before slate locks. And good luck on tonight's slate.
Good luck.